So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. This is the second discussion session in our discussion session program for small-scale PPPs. We launched this program at the beginning of the year. 2 weeks ago, we had the first discussion session. The topic of that discussion session was to define small-scale PPPs for the purposes of our program, so that as we are discussing small-scale PPPs in the next 20 sessions, we are using that same definition for our discussions. So we had a fantastic panel last week. Several members of that panel are going to be rejoining us for future sessions as well. We decided to define small-scale PPPs as follows. They are predominantly subnational projects characterized by their modest financial investment. Small-scale PPPs offer significant socioeconomic benefits and can attract local private investment, including from SMEs and local financial institutions. So this is a very important activity we are undertaking. It's the first time in the in the field of PPPs that we are discussing small-scale PPPs. The reason is that we believe that the sustainable development goals are going to be very difficult to achieve without the private sector participating at all levels in achieving the sustainable development goals. The data that we have that's generally out there talks about 300 PPP projects a year being done. Clearly, that is not enough. We need more small scale. We need more PPPs. They need to be done at the local level, and so the purpose of this program is to discuss what needs to be done in order to make sure that this happens. That not only that small-scale PPPs are done, but that small-scale PPPs are done efficiently and effectively. These are important concepts. There might be small-scale PPPs that are not captured by the data, but we need to make sure that they are done efficiently. We have a great group of discussants today. I'm going to leave the floor over to our moderator, Naif Al-Haddad, who is a member of the steering committee of WAPPP, and he is the chair of our Middle East and North Africa chapter, as well as being a director of the Kuwait PPP Authority. So without further ado, Naif, the floor is over to you and to the discussants, and thank you everybody for joining us again.
Thank you, Ziad, for the introduction, kind words. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everybody. And my name is Naif Al-Haddad, and welcome to our webinars, the series webinars made by WAPPP. And this year we're focusing on the small-scale PPPs. I believe, in the previous webinar, we have talked about defining PPPs, the small scale, how to define it, what are the parameters. Today we move on, and we have a great list of discussants. We're going to discuss what are the challenges. Now, small scale or large scale PPPs, they all face sometimes common challenges. And today we're going to discuss what are these challenges that we see that they have some kind of commonality between them and the large ones. And typically, what I'm going to talk about, 5 main challenges that I believe that have been encountered small-scale PPPs. So we talk about financing and funding difficulties, and then sometimes you have gaps in the expertise and the capacities, the human capacities. The third one is the risk management, the complexities arising from it. And then you have the legal and preparation challenges, which is that's a common challenge across all, sometimes the public utilities and entities dealing with PPPs in general. And lastly, and since we talk about small-scale PPPs, talk about the impact on the community and the social dynamics. which arise from these, projects. Now, what we're gathering here today is something which is going to shape into the future. It's like the definition, the way how we're going to do it, and tackle these PPPs. I'm honored today to feature like a huge panel of discussions, and these are people like I'm proud to have worked with, and so we're gonna listen to them and learn from them, and hopefully gain expertise and insight. So let me introduce first Amanda Lofen. She's the CEO of Human Right to Water and chair of the Water chapter of WAPPP. She possesses tangible processes and results to achieve sustainable development goals. And Amanda has been providing practical systematic approaches, drawing on a field of expertise in human rights law, governance, and project management. It's a pleasure, Amanda, to see you again from Abu Dhabi. Next, I have my good friend Mark Freelet, the General Secretary of UNC International Center of Excellence in PPP Policies, Laws, and Institutions, and a key member in WAPPP Steering Committee and chair of the Legislative Framework Chapter. Mark is, I believe he's a bit older than me, who has like 35 years of experience in developing infrastructure concessions and PPP projects across more than 20 countries. He is a prolific author. He has published over 100 documents on infrastructure and mining, focusing primarily on concessions and PPPs. He's an educator. He's still teaching legislative science, infrastructure law, and PPP development at renowned universities. Mark, it's a pleasure to have you. I'm going to keep you for last. And next, I have Maya Boragda Shibani. She's a lawyer, and Maya has been practicing, and focused on PPP and innovation. She has participated in drafting several laws and PPPs in several African countries, including Tunisia, Algeria, and other countries as well. She has worked on structuring and financing several PPP contracts and projects in France and Africa, including small PPPs. And this is something that we're going to get insights from Maya today. Maya, it's a pleasure. It's my first time to meet, and hopefully you're going to get you all the insights, what you have been practicing.
Thank you.
Next on the panel, I have Mohammed Kalim Sindhu. Mr. Mohammed is a partner director of International Consulting Associates, BVT Limited, I Consult. It's a Pakistani-based top management consultancy company. He is a PhD holder in PPPs, public-private partnerships, and he's a scholar as well. He has over 14 years of experience in water, infrastructure, health, and specialization in public-private partnership projects, in structuring and planning as well. Mr. Mohammed, my pleasure to have met you. Naresh is next, Mr. Naresh Bana, who is a great friend, and he's part of our steering committee at WAPPP, as well as he's peer-recognized international PPP advisor, working with National Highway Logistics Management Limited in India. He's the chair of the Indo-Sri Lanka Chamber of Commerce and Industry. He's part of a steering committee, as I mentioned, at WAPPP, and also regular contributor to the UN Economic Commission for Europe. Naresh, it's always good to see you again. Next is Sergey Samolis, who is also a good friend from WAPPP as well. He has over 20 years experience in infrastructure, mainly working with the banks, and hopefully he'll be good and helpful in getting us some loans from the banks, Sergey. He led teams and financed some of the largest PPP deals in the world, including small-scale PPPs. He's the founder and CEO of PPP Practice, a consultancy company in the UK. It is one of the leading accredited training organizations in the world for certified PPP professional qualifications. He's part of the steering committee, as I mentioned, and the co-chair for WAPPP's Central Asia and Eastern Europe chapter. He has an MBA degree and master's in major program management, University of Oxford. Sergey, it's good to see you again, buddy. And last but not least, I have Dr. Sayed Ali Zaidi, who is a distinguished public-private partnerships expert, leading and managing multi-billion-dollar PPP initiatives in Alberta, Canada, holding a PhD degree in PPPs with a good, robust background. Dr. Zaidi right now is elected as a chairperson for UNC Bureau of the Working Parties on PPPs. It's good to have you, Dr. Sayed. It's a pleasure. Now, I have a big panel discussing today with well worth of expertise. It's my honor to be in your presence, and hopefully all the attendees today, we're gonna get the insights and experience from you guys. Now, for all our attendees today, online attendees, we have the button for the questions and answers. Please feel free to post your questions, and hopefully in the end, we could answer it. So just to keep on time, and hopefully that we're gonna be, this kind of session will be swift-paced, getting the opportunity for everybody to speak, laying out the questions that are open. And I'm gonna tackle the main objectives of today's discussion, focusing on the 5 challenges that face small-scale PPPs. And to my discussions today, please feel free to contribute to the questions. It's going to be open to all you guys to, to give you time and allocation, but please just know that, we're like strict on the time of answering. So please, get to the point if you don't mind. I'm going to start first, with the first challenge. We talk about the investment and funding challenges. Now, my question to all today's guests, and if I'm gonna follow a TV game show, kind of thing, the first come, first serve to answer. So my question to our guests today: what are the most common financial challenges you think, in your opinion, facing small-scale PPPs, and how do they differ from the large-scale PPPs? I see Amanda smiling, so I'm gonna go with Amanda.
Right. Well, so my experience is in the water sector, obviously, with my background, and actually one of the issues is return on investment, because of the perception in the water sector that water is, well, it isn't a perception. Water is a human right. However, the perception is that it should also be very, very low cost or free, which means that there is very little money there to spend on the investment. So it's a non-starter in many respects, unless you have a blended finance model where you can actually subsidize or support the project with either some other form of funding, or find another way of creating value such that people will pay for it. So the challenge there, if I was to summarize it, is that people are not prepared to pay enough, because they don't think they should have to pay anything, and therefore there isn't any room to make a living out of it. And so it definitely needs a public part to the investment to make it financially work.
Nourish?
Yeah, it is, in addition to what Amanda has said, it's not only the willingness to pay, it is the ability to pay, because municipal level or small PPPs are encompassing fair amount of population, which is in a economically maybe not so well off region, right? So that part also is a big challenge.
Mohammed?
Yeah, thank you, Naif. I would agree with Naresh and also Amanda, because I believe these are 2 major aspects in terms of attracting the investor for the financing of small scale PPP. But one aspect that also leads to the inability to attract the financial institutes or banks for the small scale PPPs are sometimes the economies of scale, because we talk about municipal level small scale PPPs, and
Mohammed, your voice is very low, actually. We could barely hear.
okay, I think let me just add on.
Yeah, that's better. Yeah, go ahead. I think you're muted.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah, go ahead.
Better? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So I was just mentioning because economies of scale is one of the aspect that is missing in the small scale PPPs, and investors or the financing institutes, they are more looking into the economies of scale, so they can maximize the overall profit margins on the projects they are financing.
Dr. Sayed, I think you have raised your hand.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I think there are two aspects to it. One is like you will be expecting more like equity financing instead of project financing. Like it will be more like a commercial financing. And it also depends which model you're using. Let's say if you're using availability-based model, in that case, your investment, the level of private financing is so low that it will be difficult to ensure performance during the operational phase. That's one thing. And secondly, adding to what Amanda and Naresh said, and my other colleague said, that if it is a revenue-based project, there is a probability that you may end up in those mini monopolies. And that can hinder the ability to pay. And also, like the cost of financing will be more. So the expectation from the private sector will be to have more profits because it's equity financing. They will be looking around, let's say 13% margins, right? Instead of long-term financing, which you may get around 2 to 3-4% from international funding institutions. So I think those are the two different challenges I see from my perspective, but there are more to add to it. Yeah.
If before giving the slot to Sergey, because he's like next in line, but just like what you have mentioned, Dr. Said, is like regarding like private and international financing. See, there's a challenge about like international financing going into small scale PPPs. About the attractiveness. That's why, like sometimes you could see that the local private, the private local financing is going more into like for like being based on revenues. We talk about like market risk.
You're right, but local financing will be more towards commercial financing for the local banks and local institutions.
Yes.
And when you have this commercial financing instead of project financing, the cost of commercial financing is always high. So that's one thing. And also, as Ziad mentioned in the last session, and the cost of pursuit. That's a big factor also. How we can reduce the cost of pursuit. And that's the main challenge in small-scale PPPs, because your cost of pursuit is not tied to the size of the project. Like it's tied to it's a fixed cost to a certain aspect. So that's another thing. How do you reduce that cost of pursuit so that it creates more incentive for the equity players or the project leads who are investing in those projects?
I think my friend Sergey, dealing with the banks could answer that. Go ahead, Sergey.
Thank you, Naif. Yeah, I wanted to share a lender's perspective. So I worked in an IFI and in a commercial bank, one of the biggest commercial bank in Eastern Central Europe. And our team was hungry for big PPP deals. We were competing for them. But the real headache was small PPPs. And why is that? Imagine your main KPI is business volume. So you're not getting your bonuses for number of deals you signed. It's the volume. So all big banks have like the ticket size they prefer. They would love to go for projects about $200 million. Then it's sustainable, not too much of a risk, and then you can probably offload half of it via syndication, get a good fee as a mandated lead arranger. So that's why, and infrastructure does not finish, unlike commercial lending, unlike mortgage lending. It's not finished for the banker when the financing agreement is signed. It's all about implementations. A highly paid team of bankers needs to keep being engaged throughout the life of the deal. So again, what bank would be interested in smaller size deals? And though they're small, they are complex as PPPs, many of them. So they need to be looked at the HQ level. So what we at that bank came to the solution we found was to create, first of all, to teach our own stuff. And then we wanted local banks and municipalities, local branches to deal with smaller size PPPs. We put together manuals, first of all, internal, and then a solution called PPP in a box, which is standardized documentation, so on, documentation acceptable for our bank, which we made public, and everyone could use it, and that really helped.
Maya, I think you have raised your hand or still want to contribute?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, indeed. I think I'm talking also as an ex-banker in project finance, but a new entrepreneur now. I think indeed, I mean, the small PPPs, small-scale PPPs does not really fit, I mean, with traditional finance as we see it for project finance. And it's quite difficult because there are high transaction costs. There are also I mean, when we look at taking securities as we would look for project finance, it's a little bit different, and but the costs are not very different, and also the risk may be high, and we know that bankers are looking at risk also, and they are assessing them. They are also looking at how much will it cost. I mean, if we only look from the from a perspective of project finance as we used to do it for big scale PPP, larger scale PPP, indeed, it's quite difficult. We will not talk about solution today, but it's quite also, I mean, difficult because new form of financing, innovative finances, are not yet for the moment tested to be enough available also for small scale PPP.
Now the next topic is gonna be risk, so I'm still saving that for later. I'm gonna keep you like you're gonna be like on the top. But before I like hand out to Sayed, who's just been raising his hand, Naresh has been raising his hand. He want to go ahead, Naresh, and then Sayed next. You're muted, Naresh.
So, yeah. So what I wanted to basically focus on was that, as we have defined, small-scale PPPs are predominantly subnational projects. And in this, we have also seen that we need to focus, and that's one of the major challenge, is the health of these subnational entities, the public entities, the financial health. Because if they are not financially good enough, how they could be looked at positively by the lenders.
Are you talking about the governmental support?
I'm talking about, say, for example, a municipal level PPP, and that municipality is not a profit-making or a financially sound entity. What happens then? That's the point.
Sayed, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I agree. And I agree to what Sergey mentioned and Naresh mentioned. I think he made an important point that during the operational phase, there is a lender's oversight. So if you have a bigger size PPP, yeah, they have an interest in, or they can bear the cost of lender's oversight during the operation phase. But if you have a small scale PPP, the level of financing is so low that is another layer of cost for the lenders for that oversight. And adding to what Naresh just said, that if your local municipality does not have a good credit rating, then there's another layer of cost escalation for financing. So I think it all comes back together, like how do you manage low cost of financing? Not only the cost of transaction, but also the cost of financing from the lender's perspective.
But Sayed, you know, I mean, let me respond. Let me be back to the discussion. A public utility, whether it's a larger scale, if it has a bad credit rating, it's gonna be at the same phase, you know. I mean, like the same level. It's not gonna change. Whether they conduct smaller scale, like large.
So it depends. If it is availability based PPP, then your credit rating matters, because then the lenders will see who the private entity is signing the contract with. Like, for example, I'll give you an example here. Like, we have a province here which has got a AAA rating. So our cost of financing is very low. But if we have a city of Edmonton over here, which is a subnational entity, their credit rating is little lower than us. So lenders will prefer to sign contract with us instead of that. The cost of financing is different for two entities.
So you talk about like the challenge of the guarantor.
Yes, similar concept.
Okay.
Yeah. But I'm not a financial expert.
All the legals here like would be just agreeing with me. This is the matter of the the guarantor, like and the credit weighting and how they contribute to it. Okay. We could go always into this kind of session. We're not trying to find solutions. We're always like just here, like to raise all the questions. I'm gonna go to the next topic, and like Maya, like you're the first in line to raise this matter. The risk management and the mitigation for these small scale, PPPs. Now you have raised it, Maya, and I would just like ask you, not only you gotta be the first on my hit list. All my discussants like open to join this. How do issues or small scale PPPs, I would say impact, like we talk about like risk assessment and risk management, how do they impact small scale PPPs? Maya?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, just making a link between the two questions before. Just to conclude on the finance part, I just wanted to say that the problem also of the structuring of the project would impact the financing, because it is quite important. I mean, to see. I just give maybe a very brief example. I was working on a small-scale PPP in the cultural sector, and it was quite difficult to finance it. So we had to reduce the scope of the project in order to be able to make it financeable. So there is a big element of structuring as well. Regarding
so let me do. So you reduce the scale of the scope, so it became maybe like a small PPP.
Yes. Yeah.
That became like a mini PPP. Okay.
I mean, it's just, I mean, we reduced the construction and the rehabilitation parts, and we moved more on the operation. So we let the operation part as a PPP, but the local authority took the construction part in order to lower the amount and to make it possible to be financed.
Which fixes the risk sharing matrix and make it probable for like better financing. Go ahead.
Exactly. Yeah. So sorry.
Mohammed? Mohammed, you have raised your hand.
Yeah, thank you. I think this is very important aspects of project structuring when you're talking about PPP, because risk assessment is one of the core issues if we are dealing with the large scale PPP or even with the small scale PPPs. But it becomes very important in terms of small scale PPPs, because one aspect I think Naresh just mentioned in the last discussion, that the financial health of these municipal organizations or municipal authorities, that is very important. And one aspect that is on the monitoring side of the small scale PPPs, that comes up with the capacity, capability of the organization. So I mean, in countries, developing countries, there is lack of the capacity in order to even design a proper project from the public side, to have proper structure on place. So the one aspect that is very important in terms of identifying the risk is the capacity of the organization or municipal authority. And the other aspect is, again, because that is coming up with the risk of paying to the private party. I mean, in our experience, small scale PPPs are mostly economically viable. So in order to make them financially viable, you have to come up with a subsidy or some sort of government support. So that support, I mean, we try to structure a few projects where, just as just Maya mentioned, uh, the government took over the role of construction, and also to lower the overall cost of the project, and directly engage the
Reducing the scope.
investors for the
Yeah.
So that aspect is very, very important, because in the risk matrix you have to balance the risk both sides, at the private sector side, because private sector is coming up with the financial viability. So you have to make it a win-win situation for both the parties.
Okay, I have the rest of the discussions waiting in line. Mark, I'm gonna save you to last of this topic, to give us the sound of reason. But I believe who was first? Sayed, Sergey? Sayed, please. You're muted.
Yeah. Thank you. I think one of the risk I see is the new class of projects or infrastructure sector that has not been explored. You'll find those small scale projects which are like, for example, at municipal level, like small bridges, small parking lots, or small healthcare facilities, those type of projects. So we have all the data policies and regulation structured towards major, bigger PPPs. But this is a new infrastructure class, new infrastructure sector that has not been rigorously analyzed before. So we don't know what type of regulatory or policy changes will be required to accommodate or facilitate these type of projects under this new infrastructure domain or sector, I'll say.
Okay. Now, Amanda, you're gonna be right before, Mark. I'm just gonna, Sergey, please.
PPPs in project management literature very firmly sit within mega projects. And you may know that there is a separate, even association, Major Projects Management Association, separate from the Project Management Association. There's a lot of specific features of mega projects, like their duration, the size, complexity, which are different from medium-sized, smaller deals. Unfortunately, when I say small PPPs, the key word is PPPs. We can't say because the PPPs are small, they would sit with the simpler small projects. I think most of the PPPs, even if they're small, they still have all the hallmarks of the PPP, which is complex. If you go through the definition, if you go long-term contract, you have statistics that shows, regardless of the size, you will not see that the smaller size project takes shorter to complete. They basically have the same durations as mega projects. Private finance is one of the key ingredients or defining principles of the PPPs. There was always complexity. Bundled contract is one of the advantages of PPPs. If you don't have construction and operation maintenance bundled together, it's probably not a PPP, and it's difficult. It's complex. Performance-based mechanism, definitely a feature of a PPP, but monitoring of performance-based. Think of a large hospital and a small hospital. Does it make a difference? Do you need, it is a serious trade-off you need to think of to say, for a small size hospital, we'll really reduce the number of KPIs, we will not monitor it so closely. So finally, one anecdote, when I brought the first PPP deal to the credit committee of the bank I worked in, I really was unsure about how competitive our rates would be. And I said, it is a low risk project. And I was slapped on my wrists, because my credit committee told me there is no such thing as a low risk PPP. It is a 15-year deal. You cannot say 15-year deal is going to be low risk. So there's a lot to look into the features of deals that are small, but at the same time, complex as PPPs.
Let me before to switch to Naresh, let me just add something from my own personal experience. I know a certain PPP project that was like highway west areas. They have signed the contract like 4 years ago. Until now, it hasn't been completed. We talk about like highway west areas because of like licenses and access. Naresh, and then Amanda before going finally with Mark. Amanda, Naresh?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with Sergey about the risk, because the risk, in fact, for smaller PPPs, the people or the entities which are taking up these are going to be that much more vulnerable. So, in a proportion, the risk profile may be more difficult for them as it from their perspective. Now, coming to point which I wanted to make is basically the need to identify risks at that level, at subnational level, at smaller level. The capacities are very limited because it's a very complex uh, a complex exercise to define the risk in terms of incidence and impact, and then planning the mitigation. So, right identification in terms of incident and impact is seldom not available to the players who are involved at smaller PPPs. Or if it's
So
available,
it couldn't be different from even large scale.
Large scale, because the professionals, the experience, the fee for them is available, maybe the same as we have already discussed. The the cost for proposing goes up. To keep cost low, if you keep bring in experts with lesser experience, possibly you land up in not identifying your risk correctly and planning better mitigation measures, where the business will suffer if the risk mitigation is not planned adequately. So
Amanda?
identifying risk is the challenge, which I'm saying.
Okay. Amanda, please.
Yeah, I'm looking at it from a slightly different point of view in terms of risk. Looking at from the investor's point of view, if they're looking at a small PPP, it doesn't have the capacity to make the right decisions and to build the right design necessarily. And that certainly in the water sector, the procurement process was looked at as one of the areas of risk, because if the team that's doing the procurement doesn't understand the benefits of spending a little bit money to get a good product, they're not necessarily making the right decisions for the project. They've just been told to buy something at the lowest price, for example. So there's a capacity gap at every level in the project. If you don't have the money and the size to employ the best people that are trained up and well versed, and that the same applies to operations and maintenance and all of the stages in the design and operation of the project. And that creates a higher risk of investment because you don't know that it's going to be managed well. And that's where a lot of certainly in the water sector, there's a lack of operation and maintenance at the smaller scale community level projects. The money goes in at the beginning, they don't get looked after, and then after a few years they crash and your investment is wasted. Certainly true in the development sector, and so so this is something that we see as a risk factor, the capacity of the small scale. We're talking about very small scale now, but not necessarily, depends on the country.
Well, thank you for leading me into the capacity challenges. You and Mohammed have raised it. That's gonna be our next shift. Before giving the floor to Mark. Mark has been waiting too long. Mark, the floor is yours. You're muted, Mark.
Thank you. I think we could start by another angle, which is to see what currently municipalities are doing. Most municipalities around the world need to have water, power, etc. So most municipalities around the world develop procurement for water projects at a low level. So then from there, we should have a good starting point. What is specific to them when they intend to develop a project, not in a traditional way for water, for anything, for a bridge, for tunnel, for anything, but when they want to go the PPP route? Well, first of all, they have to clarify why they prefer the PPP route, and they may justify that. But assuming that is done, then the next step is what is more complex to them. Do they have to develop specifications like they have to do in traditional procurement? No, they don't have to do that. The municipality, they have to develop functional specifications, not technical specification. That is what I intend to have. And then for them, at this stage, it is much simpler than traditional procurement. So what is specific to them is then to see how to select the best possible bidder for functional specification. But before doing that, they have to do some homework. And then we are back to where you were saying in terms of the scope of the project and the nature of the risk. If I take the example of project in a poor country at the municipality level, the example of water is very good. What currently the people have in terms of facility of water? Should the municipality propose a water project which is in accordance altogether with international norms, where, for instance, in the US, you have 200 or more liter per person, perfect quality everywhere? Or should you design the project in such a way that the people can afford it for a long term? And I think what is important is to focus on that. So then at the municipal level, they have already some background. The question is how to go further, in my view, and how to have a system which permits from the functional specification, from there, then you have KPI. But before that, there is need to have a strong business case with a good economic viability and with a good financial viability. And in our view, in our experience, what is essential for a municipality is to prepare this business case, not to wait for the financial people to come, hey, I'm not agree, but to prepare that in such a way that for the bidding, then there are chances to have good bidders, and then the cost of advisor, the transaction cost, may become lower. So they are here, I think, focusing from what is already done, and from there to go further might be a good way to arrive to some kind of solutions.
Okay, I would like to intervene here and say something. I mean, like, from what we heard, these are like almost, if not almost, entirely common challenges facing also large scale. You know, what we had talked about, like, but we have to also to understand one thing, that, I mean, like, the difference in nature of the PPP project, whether like it's large or small, even especially like in small, a difference in how much the preparation is needed for, and the complexity of it. I mean, like a waste treatment project, a small waste treatment project as a municipal level would be different from, like, I would say, from maybe a health clinic, or like I would mention, like, you know, a highway rest area, etc. So, you know, just like to make sure that, you know, for each project, the costing for it is just different, and that's how it affects the risks and how the complexity of the project. Now, you know, just to save on time, the next project we're going to talk about, like, the capacities and the human capacities and the expertise that comes into this. And I believe, you know, Amanda and Mohammed has, like, you know, led us into this kind of thing. So we talk about, like, the capacity building and the human expertise in PPPs, and especially when it comes to small scale, because, like, some of us maybe have been used to, like, dealing with power plants, wastewater treatment plants, or, like, you know, infrastructure like highways. When it comes to us, it's kind of small scale, it would be maybe a challenge. So I would like to ask Amanda first. You know, okay, everybody's raising their hands. That's a good sign, but still, I'm going after Amanda first. You know, I apologize, Amanda. You know, it's good to see you smiling and laughing about it. It's great, Amanda. And this is a question that falls to everybody. So, what are the gaps in implementation expertise that is observed in conducting small scale, and how do we overcome it? And we talk about, like, here, like, this is something that affects the private sector as well as the public sector.
Well, that was about 4 questions, but actually, I think when we're looking at the very small community-sized projects, which are almost by definition PPPs, because they're involving the community, but often in necessity, because people do need water, for example, they do need waste treatment or toilets. And if there isn't enough financial availability but through the government, then they have to find a solution. Something has to be done. So they inevitably end up with informally formed, or they may be formally, but they're not necessarily called PPPs. And for them to work well, they have to have stakeholder engagement, of course, and people have to be involved in the decision-making process so that they're designed around the people that need the products. And that in itself helps to reduce risk. But the real gap in capacity is around, there's a whole lot of gaps, but they need technical support. And I think in general, people are very willing to give their time and effort to try and make community projects work, but they don't have the technical capability, and they need a little bit of funding to build the infrastructure, but they just need support. And actually, if you look in Latin America, they do have the asadas and the whole range of small scale water PPPs. It's quite formalized, and it's an inexpensive way to provide water to a lot of people. And they use volunteers in the community to help make it work. So it's about engagement with people, but they need the training to do it the best way. And actually, the sustainability of the solution is going to depend on the government playing that role of making sure that the water resource at a river basin level is also managed in the best and most sustainable way. And that can't be done at an individual level. So there needs to be that public accountability involved.
Maya, you have dealt with small-scale PPPs, and you have dealt with, I believe, human capacities. How would you describe it? How was it working with it?
Yeah, I mean, it was one of the main issue. Indeed, I mean, because there is quite a big preparation that has to be done, and the main problem was the lack of expertise, but not only, also the lack of data, because and which can also lead to mistake in financial models, which can and it's not, by the way, it's not only for small PPPs, but mainly for small PPPs. And Mark was talking before about the fact that it's better to that the municipalities know their needs, and based on their needs, they will ask for projects. I think that's essential, and that's very, very important, and that's a way also to succeed in PPPs. But the problem, and I have faced it locally, is that they don't know really what they need, and they don't know exactly how they need it. I mean, they need it. They know on a broad term, but I mean, when you enter into details and when you start preparing, it's very difficult. And sometimes also, even when the public side, they know what they want and they launch a project, a small scale project. I mean, it's not a big project where they will have a traditional player coming to propose, to give a proposal and to answer to a bid. No, I mean, they will have small actors which are not prepared as well, where there is no expertise, and so they will have some proposal which are not well prepared, and so difficult to be accepted. And then I mean, we know the following. I think also what's important is that it can be prepared, and also what we see also in practice, and especially in emerging countries, is that sometimes it's even better also to allow unsolicited proposal in order to have people working in the areas and companies, small companies working in the areas, proposing small-scale PPPs. So that's also maybe another way of
lending
succeeding.
expertise. Yeah, lending expertise to the public sector to do this. Now, I cannot
Exactly.
give the floor right now to Mohammed and Nurse because they were agreeing with you. So I'm gonna go for another segment, like maybe a different opinion. Sergey, what do you think, Sergey?
Thank you. Well, I believe capacity building in PPPs in a way is a counterintuitive thing. Mainly in our lives, we learn how to do small things, and then we've accumulated some experience, and then we move to more complex things. With PPPs, we work a lot in emerging markets, which just start their PPP programs. And even some people among our attendees now can attest to that. Countries like Uzbekistan, Ukraine, Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, all of their PPP pipelines, their practice starts with big projects, which are supported by FIs. And then it takes a lot of experience to learn how to do small size PPPs. To translate this knowledge to a local level, down the cascade to the subnational municipal level. And I recall the end of the last session, the first session, as Ziad said, CP3P is not necessary for everyone, like on the local level. And I agree absolutely. It's not only an expensive certification, but it was written from the European American perspective. And speaking about mega projects, emerging markets and small size deals, the feature is like an exotic footnote. And I think there's a big gap in terms of knowledge management, and a good opportunity for WAPPP together with UNICE on their own to produce these guidelines, helpful, which could be distributed actually in modern ways via like wiki structures and online, easy to update. CP3P is updated, was written in 2016, first edition. Now, 8 years, we are waiting for the second version of it. Life goes on, so there's a lot we could do to make this available for the local authorities as an updated guide on how to do with small PPPs.
Sergey, I have to cut you off right now to head to the rest, but I would have like to add something on my personal observation. If you make a mistake in implementation of power plant, it would be not maybe I would say exposed down to the level of the community as much of I would say a health clinic or like maybe a street lighting, So there is a scale also in dealing with this. Mohammed and then Naresh.
I think all of the panelists make their points, and all of them are very much relevant. So I just wanted to highlight the one aspect that is very much crucial for structuring the PPP project, whether it is a small scale PPP or large scale PPP, but it becomes very important in small scale PPPs because we are talking about municipal PPPs where the services are being delivered to the public and people are exposed to the services directly. So I think the one aspect that needs to be taken care in terms of building the capacity of the public sector, because currently they are assuming the role of the regulator. They are also assuming the role of technical authority delivering the services to the people. So the one aspect, and also they are the monitors. So one aspect they need to taken out from their scope is to deliver the service. So that needs to be done by the private sector. That is the core thing. So they have to limit it themselves, or maybe have their capacity develop on the regulator side. And when we talk about the regulator, so they need to come up with the need assessment of particular service they want. I mean, if you talk about maybe small scale healthcare facility or water supply and wastewater treatment, maybe. So when they come up with the need assessment, definitely they would have understanding of what kind of impact they want. So then, of course, they need to develop the business case around that. So I think these are the main points where the capacity needs to be strengthened at the public side, so they come up with proper transaction structure as they monitor the project.
Naresh?
Thank you, Naif. Having heard all these very serious and heavy, capacity building issues, almost all are covered. Let me just recollect an interesting uh, side which was quoted by one of the experts at UNEC about the small PPPs when I was having a discussion with him. From these high population density South Asia and Southeast Asian countries, I won't name the country. Now, what he said, the first and foremost capacity building needed at subnational PPPs is the attitudinal capacity. The public authority needs to acknowledge that they will be a partner. They are not ready to take that person as a partner who was their contractor yesterday, who used to always seek permission to sit down, right? Now today he can't be made to sit as a partner. Now this
That's
is
a very
what
serious issue. That's a very serious issue that you're raising.
yeah. So this is it. All this starts from here, right? So I think let's proceed. Yeah.
I've dealt with this matter. I know what you're saying is, but this is. I mean, this is very serious. Now, I want to give room to Sayed before switching to Mark, please. Sayed.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. I think all those discussion is very relevant. One thing that we are missing is that we are not discussing the capacity of the private sector. Do we have enough players in the market to bring that competitive tension for the projects? So that's something I think we have to focus on. And again, going back to the discussion, what we have seen is that from capacity and resource perspective, when you have a big scale project, the level of executive or political support you get from the government is much higher. They will make all the resources available, and it looks fancy for the politicians and to the government for this big scale project. And they don't provide same level of capacity and resources when you have a small scale projects. Even I have got a project, like I've got two projects going right now. One is like a $2 billion acute care hospital. One is like $250 million ambulatory care building. So the level of support I'm getting on those two different projects from the same government is different. And when you imagine like one high scale and a small scale PPP, so that's something I think we have to focus on. Main thing is the capacity of the private sector is important also over here.
I totally agree with you, Said, but look at it this way. See, the capacity of the private sector, if I could just intervene, and I'm letting like Mark also get into this. It's business driven. If they cannot be like competitive within themselves, within the private sector, to compete in getting these contracts, I believe that, from my own personal opinion, it's the nature of the contract that's gonna differentiate and be different, and how it is gonna be as a partner or like more like a service provider. What do you think, Mark?
Yes. Again, I'd like to come back from the ground. At the municipal level, who is the closest to the end users of the service? It's at the municipal level. At municipal level, they know the people. They are accountable to the people. They spend their time to attempt to be as good as possible for their people. Otherwise, they will not be re-elected in many cases. So then there is a small-scale PPP can be quite different from all other kind of PPP for this particular reason. Direct accountability to the people, direct democracy. And it means that in practice, when we try to have a lot of complex organization to find the needs, what are the needs? At the local level, the needs of the people, not only the community, civil society, not simply a small part of them, but the whole civil society is there. There are rich people, poor people, and still the municipality has to render essential public services. And the municipality knows that, unfortunately, in most cases, we don't have the financing to satisfy all their people. They have financing to satisfy essential public services, say for 80%, 90%. But what is marvelous with PPP is that you had the power to the municipality to provide additional essential public services in line with the SDG. So that's what we have been dealing with UNICE. Now, this means that the analysis of the needs, if it is in most cases, contrary to large projects, much simpler. And two, they are the only one to be able, because they're always there, to understand what should be the future need. So then, to have a chance to make a request for bidders which are more adapted than an engineer would do just for a standard construction project. So that, I think, is something extremely important. And in practice, we see that all the time, that they do this analysis often better. So then the second point, which is equally interesting in my view for small-scale PPP, is that it is the same for the private sector. The private sector, local companies used to render public services by contract, or used to build a plant of any kind. Those companies knows well how to work locally, how to deal locally, and then the one who are rendering public services, they know that they have to adapt to the service. They are local. They know how to do it much better than in a much larger project. So what I think is that we might a little bit consider concentrating on those two situations closer to the people, then private sector more able to adapt the time. When they are more able to adapt, it means that they are taking risks. Now we are back to the risks, so that there are less risk, and you put all that in a contract. And it is for this reason that with all the work that we have done with UNICE, we consider that unsolicited proposal is a no-go. We don't see how a private company could better understand the need of the constituent, of the people, of the citizen, of the community, of the civil society. How can it better understand how to adapt, how to propose than the local municipality? So but for us, is something to consider.
Look at it this way. We talk about like local private sector. They're still like citizens. We talk about like part of the society. So I mean, they're facing if you have somebody with like bad, awful highways, everybody's driving on the same highways, but they're taking the initiative through like unsolicited proposals or like submitting some kind of thing, kind of proposals to the state. Saeed, you want to add something before because I want to shift to the next topic, please.
Yeah, no, and I'll talk to unsolicited proposal, and we use unsolicited proposals over here also. And I think it worked very fine. It's a different concept. I talked in the last session also. It's not a public procurement process. It's a infrastructure investment approach that we are taking over here. And we have seen projects from like $7-8 billion to $200 million, and even smaller, like $40 million from Canadian perspective, where the private sector has proposed project in collaboration with civil society. So they have come up with a project which are unique ideas also, which we as a government never contemplated. So they have come up with the ideas in health sector, education sector, and small scale projects in collaboration with non-for-profit entities or civil society entities. So I think it's worth exploring that option.
Thank you, Sayed. Now I have two more main topics. I believe that we have to close in less than half an hour for the session. I mean, the challenge, like the discussion, is so heated that I don't want to know, like okay. So the next topic is which is totally related to what we have talked about right now. And we have came through across when we talked about like mainly the challenges, it's the legal technical preparations. And we have talked about this, about like, the cost, talk about like, the capacity, the ability, and who's taking the initiative. So my question goes for like, and I wanna take like a kind of random selection from the screen. I'm gonna take Mohammed first, okay, for this question. And of course, always the question is open to everybody. So regarding the legal technical preparations for the small scale PPP, as in also like the large scale PPPs, what do you think, Mohammed, are the key challenges in conducting legal due diligence and feasibility studies, technical design for small scales? Mohammed?
I think this is one of the core aspect because I mean, when we are talking about the legal framework is designed so far. I mean, in my experience, whether we talk about our country or any other country, the legal structure is very supportive to the large infrastructure projects and always supportive to the idea that is coming from the top side. But the one aspect that is missing is, I mean, how much efficient you can make the legal process. For the small scale projects, I have experienced one of the project. The cost was not even more than 100 and $200,000, but the process we followed was equal to the 6 months process of designing the projects, going to the committees for the approval and everything. So I think for the small scale PPPs, we have to come up with the regulations that are not stringent, that are very short, and also for the municipal PPPs, I was going through a document from Philippines because they have developed kind of local government PPP manuals. That is a very important document. So if we come up with a shorter checklist, that is very important because currently that is missing in the overall process. And also, for any idea, even if we allow in the regulations, the unsolicited proposal. That is very important aspect that is missing, and also it is very much challenging. And again, that is going to be linked with the capacity because the government, the people who are sitting in the public sector, they don't even know the business case. If they have something in mind, they have something in terms of need assessment, what kind of project they are looking for, and any idea that is coming from the private sector in collaboration with the civil society. And one of the project I just concluded was coming from the local NGO. It was based in small city, so they have proposed, and it was very interesting idea because they were supplying, the treated water to the community. So it was not a huge community. It was around 1,000 people residing in the community. So these kind of initiatives with the low legwork or maybe the low documentation, that would also encourage the small scale PPP to go forward.
Naresh, you had your raised hand before, you wanna?
See, I would like to basically start from the basic, that is the legislation part of it, right? The legislative support to small PPPs is a challenge. We don't see specifically mentioned legislation in any PPP's laws, right? So that is one. And then subsequently, regulatory, statutory at all levels. As a small scale PPPs face a nuanced challenge as compared to the bigger ones. And that's where we need to identify this problem also.
Okay, Sergey?
Just follow up to what Naresh said. Naresh, during the first session, I think there were quite a few interesting examples from Africa where there are even separate teams under the Ministry of Finance who deal specifically with small-scale PPPs. And there are a few PPP laws which give the size as one of the factors. And then where we work in Uzbekistan and Kyrgyzstan, the PPP laws say if a project is under $1 million, there is a special simplified way of procuring it, of getting authorizations. And even in one of the largest economies in Eastern Europe, there are 3,500 concessions and PPPs already launched. And detailed statistic analysis shows that 2/3 of these are under $1 million. Most of them have no bank financing at all. So when we look at the statistic of small PPPs, sometimes they're just there because PPPs are better than traditional procurement. There's a question from Alina in the chat saying why probably public procurement should be better. When it's not as flexible, doesn't allow unsolicited proposals, it doesn't allow bundling of contracts, people can't find anything better than a PPP, whereas they don't need all the complexity of PPPs. So for such class of really simple projects, there should be a streamlined mechanism. But other small-sized PPPs needs to be looked into very thoroughly. If there is like geological risks, maybe the government needs to support the due diligence, project preparation. So we need to treat them differently.
Thank you.
Sergey, we have even our local law in Kuwait, we have a small kind of dedication towards it regarding the cost of the project. There's like kind of, I would say, a vague kind of naming for that. Maya?
Yeah, just indeed. I mean, there are, in fact, in several African countries, laws. I mean, exceptions for small-scale PPPs. But I think, I mean, most of the time, and even when there are some exception, the legal framework is not really adapted to small-scale PPP. Also, because maybe the practice of what is exactly a small-scale PPP and how it is prepared, how it is implemented, was not very clear. Also by the legislator who did these regulations and this legal framework. So I think, I mean, one of the issues that should be addressed is to simplify the legal framework and also the regulations applicable to these small-scale PPPs, because they are not adapted on the preparation side, they are not adapted on the procurement process, and they are not even adapted also on the reporting process after the PPP is signed. So I think there is a work that has to be done on that.
Now, before like heading, Mark, if you agree with me, us being gentlemen and give Amanda some room to give her space. Go ahead, Amanda.
Yeah, I don't have a long speech on this one, but I think in general with small PPPs, we make things too complicated on the technical side as well as on the legal side. We're looking to put in high-tech, highly expensive solutions in areas that actually just need a solution. And actually the whole thing needs to be simplified to get coverage, not just on the legal side, but also technically. There are simple solutions out there that could be employed and make the whole thing a lot easier and quicker to achieve.
If we gotta, I mean, like, if we talk about conducting the legal due diligence feasibility, and I'm gonna give the room to Mark, then Naresh and Sergey again. Conducting a whole strategy, or like I would say a whole feasibility study containing a pilot projects, I would say, like, and instead of bundling them, just treating them almost in a similar manner, it would cut cost. What do you think?
Who are you asking?
What do you think? Yeah.
It certainly on the water side, there's been some big projects in Mozambique looking at bundling whole towns together to create the economies of scale in water infrastructure development. And it's been pilot tested, but it hasn't actually been replicated yet. It's a project that's been funded by UNICEF, but they are actually looking at ways of combining multiple townships together into one big project in a bundling approach. And each one is not necessarily that big an investment, but collectively it's interesting enough for the investor.
But that's like a procurement process where you talk about like from the top starting point of building the business case. If we conduct it all together wholesome, it will cut on the cost. You would have almost a semi-autonomous, I would say a semi-universal model similar that could be implemented. What do you think, Mark? Mark? You're muted.
Excuse me. It's a matter on which we have to work a lot, legal side, of course, and technical situation. What is for sure, first of all, is that there are very few jurisdictions which currently, in our view, has a legal framework, a regulatory framework adapted to the future of PPP, especially for the SDGs. And that is why we have done all that work with UNICEF. Now there is something which is there. First thing. The second point is how that can be implemented locally. And that is really something which needs to be well thought of. When we drafted the framework law, for instance, we considered its importance to have local PPP units, to identify what should be the capacity of a contracting authority before considering PPP or concession. And there is a list of issues. If you don't have the capacity to do this, and that, then you will not be authorized by an authority in a country at some level to develop PPP. So already from there, we have something which can be considered. You see, there is a word which is currently developed internationally. The word is localization. What is localization? It is, I read it, the process of bringing supranational policy to the context of a national or local jurisdiction. A lot of things are currently written on the localization. And I think for us, it would be good to have that, to keep that in mind. Myself, I'm working, I mentioned that last time, with a small island organization. They spend their time to see how to adapt things to their level. And so first of all, in relation to PPP, there is a need to have a much better, in most cases, national regulation, etc. But then there is also a need to develop efficiently these subnational knowledge sharing. And that can be done. The institution exists in some countries to do that and to feed the local people. So that, I think, should be something quite important for us, that is all localization. Then what you have to consider again is to look around how the next municipality next to you has tried to develop a project, if that's right. And then from there also, we can manage to have a legal, and then I add another point, a contractual document. Legal is something, contractual is something different. A contract which would take care in a much better way than most contracts of the most current issue, which are at the same time unforeseeable now, but with all chance to exist. So we need to enter into a new breed of contract, which are real partnership contract, not contract between the four corner rules, as it is sometimes done. A contract which will permit to adapt the service and without having to renegotiate the contract.
So Mark, what you're saying is, like, even though at these kind of challenges, capacity as an issue always come back to it, regarding like the I would say the preparation or even like the handling or the implementation.
And to finish on this, procurement is special. It should not. It's public procurement. Clearly, PPP is public procurement, but public procurement adapted to the situation, not the very traditional one. It is closer to public procurement of design and build, which exists already. So we have to consider. And the last point is the quality of the private sector. But because we are not speaking, we have just touched base on private sector, but the private sector must be in a position to identify the financing, be responsible for the financing, able to build, able to implement the contract, able to render the service, and able to adapt. That is the private sector. What we understand, what unfortunately we see more and more nowadays, is that one private sector is divided in 3 different companies, which fight between each other. I am the builder. No, I am the operator. No, I am the financier. So here, we have to consider that.
I'm a public worker, but I'll be defending the private sector right now, and I'm going to say something. If a public sector is rated A, it will attract A-rated private sector. If it's a C-rated for the public sector, it will attract C and below. That's just like, for the statement. Sayed, Narish, sorry for keeping you waiting. And I'm going to give you also the slot in the next topic, but go ahead, Sayed, and then Narish, because we have very short time limited right now.
Yeah. Thank you. Just coming back to the discussion of capacity and governing from national to municipal level, providing that PPP support. I think one thing that is critical, we have to see how government is accounting PPP in their books. Yeah. Are they considering as a debt, whether it's a revenue-based PPP or availability-based PPP? Then you have to determine how many PPP projects we can sustain. Because if you're accounting as a debt in your books, then you have to be mindful that you are not reaching such certain threshold that can put a municipality or government under or in a collapsed position. So for example, in our case, like if municipal government is taking debt or signing a PPP, we will account as a debt in government books, provincial books, and we don't allow PPP projects or any government debt, including PPPs, to go above 35% of the GDP. Because we have seen these things in different countries where people or the governments have signed the contracts and now all their future revenues are tied up and they are going back in the repayment of the debt. So that's something we have to look from the financial and debt perspective also.
Narish?
Yeah.
You can keep it short, please?
Yeah. I will keep it very short, as usual, right? So the first thing I wish to add is to the bundling which was being talked about. And here, the case of school PPPs in Greece in the second decade, last decade.
When I talked about bundling, not the procurement. I'm talking about from the beginning of the level, we're conducting a feasibility study for the whole kind of bundle,
Yeah, they did that. And subsequently they planned it out. So that is a success story. The second point which I wish to make is about the unsolicited proposals. You see, it is easier said than done. And unsolicited proposals need a very high degree of transparency and capacity of the stakeholders, which includes public and private. Otherwise, it could be just mismanaged and cause a lot of embarrassment to anybody and everybody.
It is still a challenge. Unsolicited proposals is still almost universally a challenge.
I have done a various modeling and studies into it. That was my topic in the research. So we can have it. It can take as much time as possible on discussing this unsolicited proposal and procurements. There are various issues. Suffice to say, needs a huge high level of capacity at all stakeholders and high level of transparency.
Okay, right now I have the final challenge to be listed. I have only 5 minutes, and I need also to answer some questions and conclusion. So for this one, I'm gonna at least give a chance for 1 or 2 speakers, each at least 1 minute maximum. So the last and final challenge facing small-scale PPPs is community engagement and the social impact it creates on the society and the community. Okay. Oh, okay. So the slots have been filled by Sergey and Amanda. You guys, okay? First come, first serve, and I'm gonna, conclude afterwards after answer the questions. So my question for you, Amanda and Sergey, and I'm gonna give who raised first, Sergey or Amanda? Was it?
Amanda, please go ahead.
Okay.
No problem.
Okay. So Amanda.
Amanda is first always.
Yeah. Okay. So what are the common challenges facing, measuring and ensuring that there is an impact made socially and economically when conducting small-scale PPPs? We talk about like the community, socially.
Yes, of course. And the easy answer is stakeholder engagement. But actually what I wanted to answer with was how we should be measuring the benefits and the wider benefits of a PPP project, particularly the socioeconomic benefits. And I think a lot of the wider benefits are completely lost. So if you're investing in water, for example, the main benefits to the community are better health, better productivity, and then there's a whole range of environmental benefits that are linked to all sorts of issues around improving the environment for fisheries, for other tourism, for value of the land, for the travel and potential tourism trade. It actually it isn't measured. So when you're looking at small-scale PPPs, which are providing a lot of benefits, the benefits are much wider than the actual product that they're providing. And in the case of water, it's vast. It's like 10 to 1 in terms of your investment, but that's not taken into account in the valuation stage of the project. So that's where we need to have a look at more blended finance models, which actually can recognize those values, and the government or the public part of the financial arrangement is that part of it. So I think that there is a real challenge, and the stakeholders are the ones that are able to identify what those benefits are and help in the design of the process so that we can actually achieve those benefits or even just recognize them.
Sergey?
First of all, absolutely agree with Amanda's point. If value for money, traditional approach to value for money prevalent in big PPPs is applied to small PPPs, probably not many of them will pass it with the higher proportion of costs for preparation and monitoring. So there definitely needs to be a look for wider socioeconomic benefits. And on the communities, just a small point, we mainly discuss it as a positive, but this session is about issues. So I just remember there was a few years ago a discussion in the UK about small size infrastructure. And there was a deputy mayor of London, and she said the noise politically generated by small projects is much greater in relation to their size. And politicians understand that. So if you have your bus fares go up, it means more to the local community than aeronautical fees at an airport in the capital. So we need to be, how to work with this proximity of the community as a pro and as a con to the projects.
I just want to add to something. I just remembered right now, when you talk about like small scales, there's always, we like to talk about like value for money, value for people. You remember, like, we always had that kind of thing, right? Just before like concluding and also answering, Ruba, do we have enough time? Like 5 more minutes?
We can extend maybe 5 minutes.
Yeah, please. Yeah, give us some 5 minutes, because I also like, I want Mark, 1 minute, please.
Absolutely.
1 minute.
Very briefly. All the UNICE work,
okay,
as you know, has been done on the basis of value for people. So we spend all our time on this. And clearly, what Amanda says is absolutely true. We need to go much beyond the project, beyond the border of the project, to see what the value for people. And here, there is one simple test to do. You have 17 SDGs, 17, not one. So if you meet one SDG saying my project is good because it meets one SDG, you are nearly sure that it's not a good project, not a good value for people. There is, among others, an SDG on human rights. Now, how this SDG of human rights is taken into account in the economic and financial scenario. You should think out of the box. And that, in our experience, is the future. And that all what we did with UNICE and all the details are going toward these objectives.
When we talk about like also human rights, Amanda is also like on the rights for water. We talk about like diversity. We talk about inclusion. We talk about like, you know, being part of the community. That's what it falls down to. Anyway, let me just look into, I believe that, you know, we have come to a conclusion. We have talked about like, you know, the 5 challenges for today for small scale PPPs: funding, investment, capacity building, risk management, legal technical preparations, community engagement. These are also common with the large scale PPPs. Let me look at the question Q&A and see like, you know, whether we could answer. I look at them. I see some of them have been answered. Okay, so there's an interesting question that came from an anonymous attendee. I hope like somebody would have like just clarified their name. The question goes, and we could only have one answer right now before I conclude, just to catch up time. How do we navigate the complexity of federalism when implementing subnational SPV, small-scale PPPs? In Ethiopia, the local governments have a semi-autonomous status. Anybody could give an insight, Maya, for example? You have some kind of knowledge on Africa? When we talk about like subnational and federalism? Maya's there? Yeah.
Yeah. On national and federalism, I don't really have experience. Where I have experience more is on the national level and the domestic level. I mean, what's important, I think, also it's to comply with the local level. I mean, the local level take the lead. Although it has to build a big coordination with the national level in order also to get to give the expertise, because most of the time the expertise is at the national level, and there is less expertise at the local level. But it's very important, to build this coordination and this collaboration between local level and national level in the PPP sector, but also on the sectoral experience. I mean, water or for example, I have worked on a project on the circular economy, on the reducing and recycling, where the national agency on waste was very involved with the municipality as well, in order to give its expertise and to help better structuring the project.
But I think that maybe like, you know, the person was asking, kind of mixing up between federalism and autonomous states, which is just like totally different you know, matters.
Yeah, but I think it's quite the same in the sense that we have to respect federalism, but I think also there should be good collaboration between central and local or federal also level, in order to get the best experience of each of them. Of course, complying with respecting local level federalism.
Well, we have came to a conclusion. We're closing right now. Mark, Sayed, Maya, Amanda, Naresh, Sergey, Mohammed, you've been the greatest and most challenging panel to deal with, because everybody knows what we're talking about. You know, everybody has their opinion about it, and it's very crucial. It's been an honor being on this webinar. And also to our attendees today, it's been an honor. Just to recap very shortly, so we have talked about like the challenges facing small-scale PPPs. We talk about like the matters of financing, the matters of capacity building, you know, the legal and technical challenges facing when preparing such kind of projects, and the impact on the community, and as well as the complexity that's facing in the capacity as well, and the risk management, you know, raising from dealing with these projects. We have listened to our discussion today. We have learned a lot of it. We know that there are like common issues that facing small scale as well as, you know, large scale PPPs, except like, you know, sometimes when it comes to small scales, it becomes very apparent, very peculiar, and also sometimes so specific that it poses a challenge sometimes even to the biggest expertise that when we facing with due to the size and where sometimes we have to deal with is to reduce the scope, and we have to depend also on the expertise. You know, the state has to be always ready, the private sector has to be innovative as well, and the state has sometimes proposed as kind of subsidy or support to enable such kind of business take into place. Dear panels today, attendees, thank you very much. You've been very great in delivering this, and I hope to catch you up in the next WAPPP webinar. Thank you very much.